Friends, the topic that I want to discuss with you today is the question of politics and the Baha'i Faith. In some respects, Baha'i Faith could be considered the most political religion. But then from another perspective, Baha'i Faith may be considered as the most apolitical. It all depends how we define politics. So I looked at some dictionaries and some definitions as to what politics is. So in one definition it says politics is a group of people making collective decisions. But then if you go through Webster's definitions, you see variations as to what this word politics really means. Politics, politicians, political is also explained as crafty, unscrupulous, scheming for personal or partisan gain, factional scheming for power, and so on. So as you see, the latter definitions of the scheming and manipulation and all that is that aspect of politics that Baha'is are instructed to shun completely. And on the first aspect of it, it also needs further elaboration. So in the course of the next few segments, I will try to explain the best I can, with of course going through the sources, which means the writings of the authors of the Baha'i Faith, Baha'u'llah, the founder, Abdu'l-Baha, the eldest son, and the authorized interpreter of the Writings of Baha'u'llah, and Shoghi Effendi, who was the guardian of the faith until 1957, and then Universal House of Justice. There are a number of writings dealing with this question of politics and the Baha'i Faith that I will review with you in that respect. Obviously, when we talk about politics, we also talk about different forms of government, dictatorship, autocracy. As you go through these definitions, there are some variations as to what it is. Is it a military dictatorship? Is it a group of dictators? Is it one individual, one monarch who has all the power? So anyway, we refer to that as autocracy, because in the course of this discussion we'll be referring to some of these terms. Then the other form of government, aristocracy, where there are a number of select individuals who are supposedly learned, and they serve as the people who run the affairs of the government. And then of course democracy, which is becoming more prevalent as a representative form of government, through direct participation or through representation, or a combination of the two. And of course, among the features of democracy is that we should have in democracies freedom of expression, freedom of press, freedom of speech, separation of powers, which means executive, legislative, and the legal powers to be separated, and in effect to provide a means for check and balance so that power would not be in the hands of one individual or one group of individuals, but rather shared. So as many people say, democracy is inefficient, but in spite of inefficiency, that's the best form of government that man has been able to devise, which has been mainly the product of 19th and 20th century. And essentially primarily in the West, and then gradually some Eastern countries have gradually emulated perhaps some features of democratic government. And then of course in democracies we expect citizens to have equal right before the law, and there should be civil liberties, and human rights are protected. And even though democracy is the rule of majority, but then minorities' rights are also protected in a democracy. With that, I'd like to begin with reviewing some of the Baha'i writings, which in effect could be considered most political, because Baha'u'llah has devised what he terms a new world order. And then in order to devise this world order, he has certain mandates and certain systems that he says need to come into place until humanity can become unified and harmonized, and there'll be an end to war. So from the very beginning, he addressed not only people of the world, but also the governments of the world, and the ministers and clergy and religious establishments of the world. He addressed many of these kings collectively and then individually, like the Queen Victoria of England, the presidents of the United States, at the time Napoleon III of France, Alexander II of Russia, then also the emperors of Prussia and Austria at the time, and then Abdulaziz, the emperor of the Ottoman Empire, and Nasser Shah, the king of Iran. All of that was in late 1960s and early 1970s. So these writings are collected in a volume referred to as the Proclamation of Baha'u'llah. This is a very important document for those who are interested in world order, in addressing the most critical issues of our time, political and otherwise. And so in the first segment, in the first few minutes, I'm going to review with you some of those writings, some passages from that extensive writing. So he addressed the kings and rulers of the world collectively, and in that tablet he says, "It is not our wish to lay hands on your kingdoms. Our mission is to seize and possess the hearts of men." So in that sense, Baha'u'llah is saying that he's not here to take over governments, that he's not suggesting to the Baha'is to take over any government, any place in the world, but rather he's here to change our hearts, to possess our hearts, so that we become transformed as new citizens of the world in order to change the world, to make the world a more peaceful place for our existence. In the same tablet it says, "How great is the blessedness that awaiteth the king who will arise to aid my cause in my kingdom, who will detach himself from all else but me." So in the second passage, just like Constantine of the Roman Empire in 4th century, who came to the aid of Christians in effect, and then that was the beginning of transforming the way people thought, and eventually a great number of the world citizens becoming Christians. So in effect, in that sense, he's also asking for aiding of the aid and assistance of the good kings and rulers of the world to come to his assistance in order to change the hearts of men, so that we can coexist together in a more peaceful fashion. In another passage from the same tablet, issued to the kings and rulers of the world collectively, he says, "Know ye that the poor are the trust of God in your midst. Watch that ye betray not his trust, that ye deal not unjustly with them, and that ye walk not in the ways of the treacherous. Ye will most certainly be called upon to answer for his trust on the day when the balance of justice shall be set, the day when unto every one shall be tendered his due, when the doings of all men, be they rich or poor, shall be weighed. So from old religions, the time of Moses, and particularly Jesus, and Islam, Muhammad, taking care of the poor of the world is considered very important. In effect, creating equity in the world, so that no one would die of hunger, and no one would be so rich that he doesn't know what to do with his money. There has to be created some sort of balance, some sort of equity. As he says, the extremes of wealth and poverty should be gone. So even in these tablets, he does not forget this important trust that God has with humanity, taking care of the poor. Not to create the welfare state, but to create an atmosphere so that everyone who wants to work can work, and everyone who is handicapped, who has some problems, who is old, is taken care of somehow. And you know, it's basically from then on that we have had so many advances in that respect, in terms of Social Security, in terms of Medicare, and in terms of other things which is being done, minimum wage, and basically protecting the rights of those people who are not equipped, perhaps, to take care of themselves completely. Society has some obligation and responsibility. In the same tablet addressed to the kings and rulers of the world, he says, O kings of the earth, we see you increasing every year your expenditures, and laying the burden thereof on your subjects. This verily is wholly and grossly unjust. Fear the sighs and tears of this wrong one, and lay not excessive burdens on your peoples. Do not rob them to rear palaces for yourselves, nay, rather choose for them that which you choose for yourselves. So in this part, he's addressing the question of, and of course at that time there's so many despotic rulers and kings of the world who are amassing fortunes at the expense of their citizens, and so he's addressing them in that respect. Then also in the same tablet he continues in saying that, O rulers of the earth, be reconciled among yourselves, that ye may need no more armaments, save in a measure to safeguard your territories and dominions. Beware lest ye disregard the counsels of the all-knowing, the faithful. Be united, O kings of the earth, for thereby will the tempest of discord be stilled amongst you, and your people find rest, if ye be of them that comprehend. Should anyone among you take up arms against another, rise ye all against him, for this is not but manifest justice. So he cautioned them to take care of the poor. He cautioned them not to amass fortunes for themselves. He cautioned them that ultimately the kings and rulers of the world need to reconcile and come together and have unity of thought, and that in that unity of thought, then they won't have to amass this much armament in order to continue these destructive wars that we have seen through centuries, particularly worse and worse from the middle of the 19th century and the 20th century. I indicated that he had addressed many tablets to the kings and rulers of the world, but these tablets to the presidents of the U.S. in general and Queen Victoria of England in particular have been has praised these two countries for their achievements, relative achievements as compared to other countries, because at the time, you know, France and Prussia and Austria and Russia and Ottoman Empire and Iran, Persia at the time, they were all in turmoil and all engaged in bloody wars. So here in the tablet that he wrote to Queen Victoria of England, he says, we have been informed that thou hast forbidden the trading in slaves, both men and women. This verily is what God hath enjoined in this wondrous revelation. God hath truly destined a reward for thee because of this. So England was one of the first countries who abolished serfdom and slavery, and for which Baha'u'llah praises the Queen for having achieved this important feat in the history of mankind. Then he says that we've also heard that thou hast entrusted the reins of counsel into the hands of the representatives of the people. Thou indeed hast done well, for thereby the foundations of the edifice of thine affairs will be strengthened, and the hearts of all that are beneath thy shadow, whether high or low, will be tranquilized. It behooveth them, however, to be trustworthy among his servants, and to regard themselves as the representatives of all that dwell on earth. So here Baha'u'llah is also praising England to be one of the champions of democracy at the time, but he at the same time is telling them that when they're representatives, they should be representatives of the entire humankind. So that if the hearts and minds of representatives is for doing good on earth as it is in heaven, as it is said in the Bible, then they will not be thinking of their own selfish interests and even the selfish interests of the nations, but rather they will be thinking of the good of the humankind in general. So at that time, around 1870, Baha'u'llah is giving this important advice to the kings and rulers of the world. How much better we would have been if his counsels had been heeded. I will also read for you a short passage from the tablet that he wrote to the presidents and rulers of America, collectively in general. He says in the concluding paragraph of that tablet, "Bind ye the broken with the hands of justice, and crush the oppressor who flourishes with the rod of the commandments of your Lord, the ordainer, the all-wise." So he is in effect giving a mandate to America to be the champion of peace on earth, and not only that, if there are deviators, whether it is the oppressive rulers of Europe who invade other countries, or other major problem in the globe, America should take the initiative to put down those fires in effect and bring about peace and tranquility to the world. These series of tablets comes to about 130 pages, and it is wonderful reading. The Proclamation of Baha'u'llah. In this part, I'm going to reflect on some of the writings of Abdu'l-Baha, the eldest son and the authorizing interpreter of the writings of Baha'u'llah. The reason why Baha'u'llah had this will and testament for humanity, so that after he passed away there won't be disintegration of religion, and it happened in previous religions. So that's why he had this. He said that my eldest son, who has been with me all my life, is the sole interpreter, so that people would not have various interpretations as to what he really meant with what he said, although many of his writings are quite clear. Among the writings of Abdu'l-Baha is this small book called The Secret of Divine Civilization. And although this book was initially addressed to the people of Persia, but a lot of it, has global implications. So, for example, in the passage, he says that the state is based upon two potent forces, the legislative and the executive. The focal center of the executive power is the government, while that of the legislature is the learned among the population. And then he goes on elaborating on this theme. Then on another passage on page 64, he says, "True civilization will unfurl its banner in the midmost heart of the world, whenever a certain number of distinguished and high-minded sovereigns, the shining exemplars of devotion and determination, shall, for the good and happiness of all mankind, arise with firm resolve and clear vision to establish the cause of universal peace. They must make the cause of peace the object of general consultation, and seek by every means in their power to establish a union of the nations of the world. They must conclude a binding treaty and establish a covenant, the provisions of which shall be sound, inviolable, and definite. They must proclaim it to all the world and obtain for it the sanction of all the human race. This supreme and noble undertaking, the real source of the peace and well-being of all the world, should be regarded as sacred by all that dwell on earth. All the forces of humanity must be mobilized to ensure the stability and permanence of this most great covenant. In this all-embracing pact, the limits and frontiers of each and every nation should be clearly fixed. The principles underlying the relations of government towards one another definitely laid down, and all international agreements and obligations ascertained. In like manner, the size of the armaments of every government should be strictly limited, for if the preparations for war and the military forces of any nation should be allowed to increase, they will arouse the suspicion of others. The fundamental principle underlying the solemn pact should be so fixed that if any government later violate any of its provisions, all the governments on earth should arise to reduce it to utter submission. Nay, the human race as a whole should resolve with every power at its disposal to destroy that government. Should this greatest of all remedies be applied to the sick body of the world, it will assuredly recover from its ills and will remain eventually safe and secure. So he elaborated on some of the writings of Baha'u'llah in saying that, again, the governments of the world should come together, they should limit the armaments, they should be cognizant and watchful of the deviants. You know, we always have deviants in the world who, because of power and because of selfish desires, want to disrupt the order, so that the rest should be cognizant in order to bring that particular group or nation, or what we call rogue nation at this time, to submission, to total submission. So this collection is about 120 pages from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha. There are many other writings of Abdu'l-Baha dealing with this question. I'm going to just share with you a couple of passages from another collection which one of the prominent Baha'is, a member of the Universal Justice, Mr. Ali Nakhjavani, has put together. It's called Towards World Order. Towards World Order. In this collection, he refers to a tablet from the writings of Abdu'l-Baha, which is very famous, and is referred to as the tablet of 7 candles, the 7 candles. In this tablet, he lists what he calls the 7 candles that brings unity. I'm going to read this not in the order which was revealed for a reason that I'll just explain. In this, he says that this unity should be unity in political realm, unity in freedom, and unity in nations. And then he refers in this tablet that most of this, or all of these things, would be definitely be achieved by the end of 20th century. This was toward the beginning of 20th century when Abdu'l-Baha revealed this tablet, before World War I. So by political freedom, we can say that now we have the United Nations, unity in freedom, meaning that the end of colonialism came to pass, again, particularly after the United Nations. Many countries of the world who were dependencies and colonies of England and France and other nations became independent. And unity of nations, that it is not a definite timeline, but that we are very close to it. At least we have the world represented in the United Nations. At least we have consultative body, the General Assembly, and on many issues they discuss and they resolve many of the issues. And on many global issues, such as the question of environment, and the question of ecology, and the question of air traffic, and water safety, and air pollution, and many other similar issues, we have had good global agreements. And they are working on issues such as human rights. Of course, we have the first Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, but there are so many violators in the world. So they're working on that thing diligently in many parts of the globe, as well as the problems among nations and between certain nations, and so on. So many of these things that Abdu'l-Baha predicted beginning of 20th century was indeed achieved by the end of 20th century. And this is what he calls the requisites for the lesser peace, so that at least the nations come together, at least they try to resolve the problems peacefully so that we won't have war again, and so on. And then next he also discusses, he says the next candle is the candle of unity of world undertakings and unity of languages. In many ways we're getting there, but we may still be a number of years, a number of decades away from it. Unity in world undertakings. You know, if we have, the world should be resolved, that United Nations, in order for it to be effective, they have to have a power of taxation. Or at least, for now, the member nations should not give voluntary donations, but they should be obligated to pay the fair share for running the affairs of the United Nations. Or on the question of armaments, there should be, in this unity in world undertakings, they have to come together to come to an agreement so that the arms be limited and essentially for the protection of nations rather than for having enough power in order to invade other countries, which has destroyed so many cities and so many lives throughout the world, and particularly in the 20th century, where the level of destruction because of the powerful ammunitions which were developed was more than what we had for the rest before the 20th century. And that, you know, unity in world undertaking and unity in world languages, by the time we have a global language where it can be used as an auxiliary language where at least all people of the world, wherever we go, we can communicate. And when you communicate, when you face to face, that takes away a lot of anxieties, a lot of ill feelings of not understanding each other. We can better understand each other. And those could be the requisites, based on what I read in this writing, the Writings of Baha'u'llah, that these could be the prerequisites for what Abdu'l-Baha calls the greater peace, from the lesser peace to the greater peace. That is not the end of it. Then he goes on and says that he talks about two other candles, the candle of unity of races and unity of religions. Again, so we have come a long way from the time Britain and then all other Western nations, including this country, abolished slavery. Started from the time of Lincoln, but was achieved, a lot more was achieved at the time of Martin Luther King by the 1960s, and a lot more still needs to be achieved. So this is unity of races. Ultimately, it says unity of religion. And it says this is when the hearts and minds of men can come together in understanding that if there is really one God, and there is really one human race, that we have divided into nations and races and sexes and all the rest, then all these manifestations of God, prophets of God, have come from the same source, and there is really no antagonism between Moses and Jesus and Muhammad and Krishna and Buddha, and that Baha'u'llah, who is the manifestation of God for this age, has come to unite all these religions and all the divergent and different parts of the human race. So this ultimately, if it ever comes to pass, then Baha'is believe that it will ultimately come to pass, is when we achieve what is called the most great peace. I'll refer perhaps to another passage here in this book, and that is, if I can find it, this is now we go to the writings of Shoghi Effendi, who was the guardian of the Baha'i Faith from 1921 to 1957 when he passed away. And he was the elucidator of the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdu'l-Baha. And he was the one in charge of keeping the cohesiveness and unity of the Baha'is and guide them in those years. So he says in a passage which is also from this collection, that the Baha'i administrative order incorporates within its structure certain elements which are to be found in each of the three recognized forms of secular government, without being in any sense a mere replica of any one of them, and without introducing within its machinery any of the objectionable features which they inherently possess. It blends and harmonizes as no government fashioned by mortal hands has as yet accomplished. The salutary truths which each of these systems undoubtedly contains, without vitiating the integrity of those God-given verities on which it is ultimately founded. So in this passage he's basically saying that all of these systems of government, even autocracies and oligarchies and aristocracies, they had some good elements. Perhaps they were more efficient. Efficiency is not bad. Perhaps there was not so bickering until they reached an agreement. That part of it was not bad. But then the fact that they became autocratic, they became vicious, they became dictatorial, did not let other people to flourish, was definitely bad. So that's why we said democracy is much better than those. But they had some, perhaps they had some good elements in that. Another writings from the writings of Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, is this one. It's called The Promised Day is Come. Also in this collection he refers to the vision of Baha'is as to how it will be. And he says that ultimately this vision of the lesser peace and the greater peace and world peace, that is the vision of Baha'is, and Baha'is are working toward it, primarily through their actions, through remaining peaceful, through consulting on any issue that comes along, in not bickering and not creating conflicts and anxiety among themselves and among the larger human race. So he says that this world commonwealth, the vision of Baha'is, is destined to emerge sooner or later out of the carnage, agony and havoc of this great world convulsion. He wrote this before World War II. And he said that eventually we'll get there, one way or another. Either humanity understands this message of peace and harmony and starts reading it, exploring it, reflecting on it, and implementing the parts that are applicable, or that we'll learn it the hard way through more agony and more war and more destruction. And he says this system by its nature will be a gradual process and must, as Baha'u'llah has himself anticipated, lead at first to the establishment of the lesser peace, which the nations of the earth, as yet unconscious of his revelation, and yet unwittingly enforcing the general principles of which he has enunciated, and this momentous and historic step involving the reconstruction of mankind as the result of the universal recognition of its oneness and wholeness will bring in its wake the spiritualization of the masses, consequent to the recognition of the character and the acknowledgement of the claims of the faith of Baha'u'llah, the essential condition to that ultimate fusion of all races creeds, classes and nations, which must signalize the emergence of his new world order. So all of this is really the different elements of what needs to be done until we reach that point of peace on earth and this is heaven, as many people recite it in churches every week, every Sunday. So this is what we Baha'is believe, that is the destiny of humankind, but we should pray about it, but prayer is not enough. We have to start acting on it. We have to see what are the ways in order to be able to achieve this goal that humanity wants from us. In another of the collections of the writings of Shoghi Effendi, called The World Order of Baha'u'llah, I will read a passage or two from this book. In this passage on the world unity, which is the goal of the Baha'i Faith, he says, he quotes the words of Baha'u'llah, "A new life is in this age stirring within all the peoples of the earth, and yet none hath discovered its course or perceived its motive. O children of men, the fundamental purpose animating the faith of God and his religion is to safeguard the interests and promote the unity of the human race. This is the straight path, the fixed and immovable foundation. Whatsoever is raised on this foundation, the changes and chances of the world can never impair, nor will the revolution of countless centuries undermine its structure. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. So powerful is the light of unity that it can illuminate the whole earth. The one true God, he who knoweth all things, himself testifieth to the truth of these words. This goal excelleth every other goal, and this aspiration is the monarch of all aspirations." So he goes on and explaining this passage. So essentially then, this is the political aspect of the Baha'i Faith. We are working for world unity. In order to reach world unity, there are many steps, and it's not only limited to Baha'is. The whole world is working on it, but the majority of the world are unconscious of it. Baha'is say that we are conscious that this is our destiny. Our destiny is not destruction. Our destiny is construction. And we have to work together in unity, in harmony, not through division and destroying one another. In the previous sections, we reviewed the writings of Baha'u'llah, Abdu'l-Baha and Shoghi Effendi, mostly with regards to this global system and global vision, which is the vision of the Baha'i Faith. How to bring about peace and harmony to the world. So in this sense, this is the Baha'i political system, what Baha'is want to have. At the same time, in another series called A New World Order, I discussed with you the Baha'i approach to it, which means that how do we function as a Baha'i community. So Baha'is are trying to bring this vision to reality, at least within the Baha'i community. So that, briefly, I indicated there that in the Baha'i elections we have no partisanship, no candidacy, ballots are secret, there's no propaganda in the Baha'i Faith, and this is how election is done, and there's no party affiliation. There's one party, Baha'is. And so we elect, so we elect 9 people on the city level, and then 9 people on the national level, and 9 people on the international level to represent Baha'is for their affairs, for their community affairs, for teaching and protection of the Baha'i Faith, and for serving the Baha'i community and the larger community. So this is the Baha'i political system in which we all participate. So at the same time, we have to function in the world that we are in today. For that, we have certain rules which have given the appearance that Baha'is are apolitical. First and foremost then, Baha'is are non-partisan. We cannot get involved in partisan politics. And the second aspect is that wherever we are obedient to the government, to the laws of that country, and we work together with the population for whatever is peaceful, whatever is unifying, and try to heal the wounds of society rather than adding to the wounds of society. So in that respect, I'm going to read for you a few passages that deals with this aspect. So with regard to obedience to government, in this passage from the writings of Shoghi Effendi, is that the cardinal principle is obedience to the government prevailing in any land in which we reside. We cannot, because say we do not personally like a totalitarian form of government, refuse to obey it when it becomes its ruling power. Nor can we join underground movements which are a minority agitating against the prevailing government. So whether it is any form of government at this time, we obey it, we try to help those people in charge and those people in that society, and then we promote the idea and the ideals of the Baha'i Faith at the same time, in a peaceful manner, in a non-contending and non-aggressive manner, because this is the way Baha'u'llah says ultimate peace and harmony and unity would be achieved in this age. In another passage, which is a letter written on behalf of Shoghi Effendi, it says that the Baha'i cause, being essentially a religious movement of a spiritual character, stands above every political party or group, and thus cannot and should not act in contravention to the principles, laws, and doctrines of any government. Obedience to the regulations and orders of the state is indeed a sacred obligation of every true and loyal Baha'i. So Baha'is then are totally obedient. We work for peace, we work for bringing harmony, but we do not rise against any system, no matter how much bad they may have done to the Baha'is. Because ultimately, they are also children of God, and we need to help each other until we achieve this peace and harmony in the world. What I'm reading for you now are among the passages from the Lights of Guidance, which is the reference manual for Baha'is from the authoritative sources of the Baha'i writing. Many of these passages are again from the Guardian of the Faith, Shoghi Effendi, and the Universal House of Justice that runs the affairs of the Baha'is on a global basis. Let me read for you a couple of passages dealing with this non-involvement in politics. In this passage, from a letter written by the Universal House of Justice, the Universal House of Justice explains to Baha'is that the Baha'i community is a worldwide organization seeking to establish true and universal peace on earth. If a Baha'i works for one political party to overcome another, it is a negation of the very spirit of the faith. Membership in any political party, therefore, necessarily entails repudiation of some or all of the principles of peace and unity proclaimed by Baha'u'llah. As Abdu'l-Baha stated, one party, and our party is God's party. We do not belong to any party. So partisan politics and getting involved in partisan politics is forbidden because it is against the principle of unity and harmony. Some contend that unity and harmony is not achievable, but we say we are children of the same God. We try every day through prayers and meditation to become harmonious and one with God. That is the goal of all the followers of all the sacred religions across the globe. And that if it is God's intention, it will come to pass. And we believe in it. Mr. Ali Nahshawani, a retired member of the Universal House of Justice, has collected a number of writings of Shoghi Effendi and Universal House of Justice on the question of non-involvement of Baha'is in today's partisan politics. And it is titled Political Non-Involvement and Obedience to Government of Baha'is. This is a small compilation of about 30 pages, and I'm going to share with you a couple of passages from this collection of writings. In one passage from the Guardian, Shoghi Effendi, he says, "We must build up our Baha'i system and leave the faulty systems of the world to go their way. We cannot change them through becoming involved in them. On the contrary, they will destroy us." That's again why we don't get involved in partisan politics. We as Baha'is, if we wish, we vote in all elections, but we vote independently without any party affiliation. Also, we cannot hold any political office, but we can of course serve the government in non-elective and appointed positions, as long as it is not political. It is not partisan in its nature. In another passage from Shoghi Effendi, he says, "We should, every one of us, remain aloof in heart and in mind, in words and in deeds, from the political affairs and disputes of the nations and of governments. We should keep ourselves away from such thoughts." Again, the reason for this is that first, Baha'i Faith needs to be unified, and then we have to be examples of how we can bring peace and unity and harmony to the world. In another passage, again from Shoghi Effendi, he is asking the Baha'is that we should abstain individually and collectively, in words and in action, informally as well as in all official utterances and publications, from assigning blame, taking sides, however indirectly, in recurring political crisis, now agitating and ultimately engulfing human society. So we don't take sides, but we are working for the cause of peace and harmony together. We address the faults, but without blaming it on one party or another party. In another passage from Universal Justice, it is indicated that the faith, the Baha'i Faith, is not opposed to the true interests of any nation, nor is it against any party or faction. It holds aloof from all controversies and transcends them all. So again, the point being that we are non-political in the sense that we are non-partisan. We take part in the affairs of society, but then our attempt is to bring harmony and peace, not be another cause of division and hatred and animosity among the members of the human race. Well, in the previous few sections, I gave you an overview of politics in the Baha'i Faith. We reviewed some of the writings of Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i Faith, Abdu'l-Baha, the eldest son and interpreter of Baha'u'llah's writings, Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i Faith, as well as some of the letters of the Universal House of Justice. Briefly then, Baha'is are engaged in the affairs of society, in different professions, whether we are doctors or teachers or workmen of any kind, in all the affairs of society. We try to lead a peaceful existence. We try, according to the admonitions of Baha'u'llah, we want to avoid conflict and contention in our personal affairs and as well as in our affairs in society in any capacity that we have. We work diligently for world peace and harmony, and we believe ultimately the world order where many of the teachings of Baha'u'llah would come to pass will definitely come to pass. We need to be aware of it and work with all the people of goodwill in achieving that peace and ultimate harmony across the globe. At the same time, at this stage of human development, we are totally obedient to the government of our country, and at the same time, we do not engage ourselves in partisan politics, because if we do so, that would be against the very basic principle of the Baha'i Faith, which is oneness and wholeness of the human race. We try to avoid conflicts and divisions, and we try to bring peace rather than being a contributor to this harmony. Thank you very much for your attention.